Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to one of our evenings at the library. And I'll just say a few words before we get started. My name is Chris, and welcome to the library. We're going to make these a recurring event, hopefully monthly, at least through the high season. I know I saw a few folks here for the first one with Sam from Crown Point. We had a great evening. Tonight we're going to get into some local history with Tim, who was nice enough to join us. And I expect this to be part lecture and part discussion. So be ready to chime in with your own stories and questions. Before we do that, I just want to show you a few things that we've been uncovering here at the library in the last couple of days. Literally, the last 24 hours, we found a really cool folder of some artifacts, some paper artifacts that I want to show you and sort of tease one of the talks that's going to be coming up. Quick housekeeping before we do. There are beverages. We've got some water and soda up here. Please help yourselves. We do not have a restroom, as you may know. If you need to use the facilities, they'll be right across the street at Stewart's. They won't mind one bit. We also have an email list that we're starting. We'll be putting out an e-news coming up within probably the next couple of weeks. We'll have something going out. So if you'd like to join that email list, hello, welcome. I promise I won't send you timeshare information or anything, just good information about the library. Most important piece of information about the library for us right now is we have a vote coming up on the 23rd of this month. Voting will be open here at the library from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. and we would love your support. This is to give us some of the money from the school budget, from the school tax roll. And it would be a great help for us as we try to expand the library's programming and stabilize our budget going forward. So again, 23rd from 1 to 8, the vote is going to be here at the library, not at the school, so we'd love you to stop by, whichever way you're voting, but you know which way I prefer. With the housekeeping out of the way, just a few things I want to show you. If you're on our Facebook page, you may have seen this document that was uncovered in one of the old library records. This is the original document authorizing the money to be spent to renovate this building that you're sitting in after the fire of 1907 and to add the back section onto the library in that same year. And I just thought this was really a really cool little math exercise. If you're on Facebook, you're going to see the numbers. It was about $3,500 for the renovations and about $5,700 for the addition onto the back. Converted to 2023 money, that's around $300,000. So always fun to look back at those old numbers. And then in one of the drawers, sometimes we find folders of cool stuff, and I don't often have a lot to go on. This was the note that was in there. Doesn't tell me a whole lot about what's in there, but what we did find were some real treasures. This handbill and broadside, I've got to do some more research on. Again, this was uncovered yesterday, but I think this is going to be possibly an 1812 recruitment brochure. And some things I can put a more firm date on. Here's the 1888 presidential election campaign poster. That was also in that little folder of goodies. And this one is super interesting and may develop into its own talk. This is Mr. Robert Nelson. Bob was a really interesting guy. He ended up holed up with about 300 separatists on Albert, one of the islands up northern part of Lake Champlain. This is just after the War of 1812 comes to the conclusion, about early 1830s. And he's trying to rouse the folks living in southern Canada to rebel against the crown. And he would eventually be elected the future president of Lower Canada, the Lower Canada Republic that they were trying to get started. But he ended up in jail. There he is. Interesting fellow. And then we find these little just bits and pieces of paper. Little folded up things, and I haven't even read these, but this one's dated 1796 and is a receipt of some type. And I think we've got 2 sheep is what the receipt is for. So paid in full. If the name Doolittle means anything to anybody, see me after, because there seem to be some papers from a George Doolittle's personal effects, I believe.
Hey, Chris, the first handwritten note, did that say McLaughlin?
Yeah, Judge McLaughlin.
Oh, yeah. No, keep going.
No,
I want you to go all the way back.
You want me to go all the way back?
Yeah, it was
Right
Warner.
I believe so. So, yeah, Mr. McLaughlin, I believe, was an officer of the library board.
Okay.
So I think this is an internal note saying, please give this to somebody else.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
Somebody.
This is Warner, isn't it?
Sorry?
Mrs.
Looks like
Warren.
Warner.
Yes, who
Yeah.
was also, I believe, a board member of the library. I recognize some of these names.
Okay, thank you.
And we've got just some more letters, early 19th century, 1808 on this one. I think it's another receipt, a little business document. Full letters that I've even yet to read through. So some very interesting, this is the outside, the envelope of that letter. You used to just fold your letter, put a seal on it, send it in the mail. But this is the one that really piques my interest and is applicable to this evening's talk, so I wanted to bring it up. This is an 1825 bill for services. And I wouldn't be able to tell you whether this was written by the laborer or by their boss, but I love these little personal effects. You know, I don't know whose it is, I don't know who the players are, but it's talking about how much work they did on what date, planting and taking care of what crops, and then their total bill, $2.72. Which for the time period is decent laborer money. But just think of this being folded up, put into somebody's pocket after they get paid, tucked away into their personal effects, and somehow makes it here to us, a couple of years later. Somebody can do the math. And what makes these so interesting to me is that it's that personal connection to the people that lived here before us. We're doing essentially the same stuff we do. You put a receipt in your pocket from Stewart's every single day. It's the same life activity, and I feel that these little things really connect us to the people that were living here before us. So I think with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Tim to tell us some of the stories about those same people that were here before us and what they were getting up to. Switch over to your pictures.
Awesome.
And can you reach this, or can we give you somebody to flip screens when you're ready?
Tim can flip screens.
He left.
Oh, he left.
I can slide this right over to you.
Okay, just gotta show me how to flip.
Yeah, I will do that.
I can come there if you want me to, Tim. Do you want me to do it? Or?
There's a chair.
You just go
No.
forward and back.
No.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll probably do
So then
that.
you can do it at your own pace. I'll
cool.
get myself out of the way.
Well, I don't know if all of yous know me, but most of yous do. Thank you very much for coming. Sue, Mrs. Nephew asked me to come and give my history tour. It's nothing special. It's what I used to do with the kids. I drove a field trip one day for 4th grade. To tell you how I got started. And we were going down Convent Hill, and the woman that was given that had the 4th grade, she was hired by Sarah Hunchman through a grant from International Paper. And she was from Essex, and I think her name was Bonnie McLeod, is it? Or Cloud? Okay. And she knew a lot about architecture and stuff, and which is what the kids were studying then, and partly, and she wanted to show them the different parts of the village and buildings and stuff. And so she wanted to go to Powerhouse Park. So we got down, made the turn to go towards the boat launch, and as we crossed the little bridge, she goes, "Now children," she says, "here's Tunnel Avenue," she goes. And now, does anybody know why they call this Tunnel Avenue? And the whole bus exploded and said, "Yeah, because there used to be a tunnel there." And I said, "Used to be? The tunnel's still there." You know, it struck me that they didn't know that. You know? Of course, they're only 4 years old. Why would they? They're in 4th grade. Why would they? So I said, "You want to go see it?" And they all went, "Yeah!" You know, and she said, "Oh, yeah, can we?" I said, "Sure." So I drove up Tunnel Avenue, a little winding street, and went back, and I pulled right up. She goes, "Where's the tunnel?" I said, "It's right there." It was literally right out the door of the bus. And they all got out, and we had to get out and make sure that they didn't get too close and fall into it and all that. anyways, she thought that was the neatest, so she requested me for every field trip she had after that. So the more she requested me and the different things she got into, and the more I put two and two together and four together and come up with the stuff that my grandfather and my father had told me, and different stories about how this was, why it was, and and just even people I worked with, like Jel Vanderhoff, who used to live down there, told me different stuff about skin flats. Skin flats evolved. The name of it evolved from Skeen Flats. It was 600 acres of land that was owned by Philip Skeen from Whitehall, who had Skeensboro, who in 2 or 3 more days, 248 years ago, they captured Skeensboro, and they captured Fort Ticonderoga, and they captured Fort Crown Point, them being Benedict Arnold, Ethan Allen, and they took over Skeensboro, and, well, anyways. So anyways, I got into, this is what I did when I just get rambling on it, and it just rolls out of me. And the more I think of it, the more I keep trying to say, talk about different stuff. The pictures are gonna help, believe me, keep me on track. So, anyways, I got interested, that's how I got interested in it. I was never interested in history in school. Asked Mr. Baker, Joe Baker, if you know Joe. Although I was the only one that passed my final in history. Remember how tough that was, Karen? I got a 66. And he asked me if I cheated. I said, no, I didn't, Mr. Baker. I said it was all on what we had during the midterm. I said it was on the amendments and stuff. I said, and I could remember it, And he goes, well, he says, you're the only one that passed. I went, it was so bad he had to curve the grade, remember? He did. Karen on the test that actually was in my head. So, anyways, all of a sudden here I am 50 years old, and I'm interested in what went on in Port Henry. And I start, getting into pictures that my mother had and different stuff. Oh, and it just keeps snowballing and it keeps getting worse. So Mr. Newton, who was another teacher at school, because I was a custodian bus driver at school. So I had contact with Mr. Newton all the time, I'd see him. And he finally heard from Sarah Ochman and Miss Bonnie McLeod that I gave an interesting talk, and he said, well, how would you be interested in giving 7th and 8th graders a field trip around town? And I went, geez, I don't know, Mr. Newton. I said, I don't know what to say and do. You'll be fine, he said. So that's what I started doing. And then I did that for 1 year, and then the following year he wanted me to do it again. What I did was I took and bought some cheap folders, and I went to the central office, and I had a whole bunch of pictures from all the calendars that my mother had bought from the Historical Society. And I copied all those pictures, and I made a tour starting from school. And we'd go up and we'd go over the Forge Hollow Road and down through, and then we'd take a right at the Four Corners by Elkin Road, and then we'd come back down out by the Witherby Mansion. And there's so much stuff that happened, and you could see all the way down through there. Anyways, what I wanted to start with tonight is telling you how Port Henry got its name. I don't know if all of you know that, or how it got it. Port Henry it all starts back around not much before 1731 is known, I don't think, is it, Chris?
Sorry?
I say not much is known before 1731. They had the fort. They had a fort at Chimney Point in Vermont, which they found the remnants of when they dug up for the new bridge. Okay, they found the footings for the fort itself.
For the ferry
And
launch.
pardon?
For the ferry launch.
Yeah. And so then they moved over and they built a French fort for the French and Indian War, which was 1754, I believe. And then after that, of course, the French gave up and the British came and they built a larger fort, and we have Fort Crown Point. Well, Port Henry was part of a land grant that was given. It was a Porter land grant. And it was the same land grant that Philip Skeen had, Skeen Flats, basically. It contained 600 acres. And it was called Lewis Mills because they had a sawmill. Yes, George?
Where is Skin Flats? Where exactly is Skin Flats?
Skin Flats is from Bouyer's old thing, and then north.
Oh, Mark.
Like it took in. That's where he owned part of the. When they first started digging for ore, that's where the Cheever mine ended up being. They hit that ore bank, but the ore was right at the top, coming out of the ledges, and the rust was running down. They have a painted picture of it someplace, I believe. I don't know where exactly it is, but it shows how the rocks were rusty from the iron that was protruding out of the ground. And that's where Skeen used to bring his Negro slaves to dig ore for his blast furnace in Skeensboro. So, when Ticonderoga and Crown Point all fell to the Americans, Benedict Arnold took Skeen's Negro slaves that he had, and he brought them up and dropped them off while he continued on up farther to get some lumber on the schooner that they had to build a fleet that he was preparing for the battle with the British on Lake Champlain, which took place at Valcour Island. Now, supposedly, they say he got that iron ore that fitted those ships from Moriah, from Cheever, actually, right next to the lake. Now, that mine, it turned into the Cheever mine, and it ran underground, and it was a high grade of ore, and the man that was mining it was Major. He received ore from the person that were mining it and knew it was a high grade of ore. His name was Major Dalaba. He was in charge of the the armory, I believe, in Watervliet, where they made cannon.
The arsenal.
The arsenal, yeah. They made cannon there, so he knew what kind of grade of ore this was. Well, he got interested in the ore and purchased it with another man, and he owned the land for quite some time. And he and the other man opened a mine basically on the same tract of land, but not as close to the lake. And they called it the Lee Dalaba Mine. Well, the Lee Dalaba Mine just happens to be in the back of Mr. Aitner's house. And that's where Mr. Aitner raises fish. Because it's full of water. Okay? Now, I've been in it, and Mr. Aitner actually had the Maritime Museum. They came over and they dove down in there, and they found an old mining wagon down in there, and they found a pick and shovel and things like that, and they left it all right there. They used to throw, when there was a butcher shop there, they used to throw the bones and the carcasses of the cows down there after they had butchered them to get rid of them, you know. So, but anyways, this Major Dalaba, he decided that Lewis Mills wasn't a good name, and he had a father-in-law. Major Dalaba, I'm getting ahead of myself. Major Dalaba bought that tract of land so that he could mine that iron ore because he knew it was of a high grade. So he wanted to start his own blast furnace, and he did. He started it, made stove works. They made cast iron stoves, and they put out like 15 to 18 ton of iron a day, blasted a day, which was pretty good back then. It was one of the first blast furnaces in New York State. And so he married a girl from Rye, New York. Her name was Huntington, and she had an uncle. His name was Henry Huntington, and he was quite prominent in politics, and was actually in a close race for an office. I don't know exactly what the office was, but when he ran for the office, it was so close that it had to be decided by the head one in charge at the time over the election, which was Aaron Burr. You might have heard of him. Well, actually, from what I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not. I think someplace it sticks in my mind that I've read it someplace. When Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton got in their duel, Henry Huntington was Aaron Burr's second. That's what I heard, what I've read somewhere. It just seems to stick in my head still. I have to do more to find that out. But anyways, so Major Dalaba, in honor of Henry Huntington, he thought so much of him that he changed the name of Lewis Mills to Port Henry. So that's how Port Henry got its name. So it's not from anything other than, and it was a port on Lake Champlain. You know, they had the dock at Cheever and the dock at, you know, down in front of his blast furnace. And his blast furnaces, there's still parts of it that stick out today, very prominent, and people go by it every day and they don't know it. Years ago, it was built, it was taken down, I should say, by a man, George, some of you remember the name of Johnny Wheelock. Remember old Johnny Wheelock? That's Bumper's father. Okay, Bumper's father was a mason, and he did a lot of beautiful stone work on his house where Pete Gilbo lives now. Remember when he lived there, where Pete and Becky live now? Okay, the front wall, as you're going up by Pete's house, the front wall of Pete's house, near the road, is all stone from that blast furnace. He came down and tore it down and took the stone and carried it up there, and that's where, and I was told that by Jill Vanderhoof.
Where was that blast furnace? Right down,
It was right across from the entrance to the tunnel, where that's the brick, that brick,
Vanderhill's house?
the brick house is I think that was a machine shop for the Bay State Mining Company at one time.
Is that Tunnel Avenue?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyways, this is a gravestone. We took this the other day, my son and I, looking through the fence on the back side of the Union Cemetery as we were on the Forge Hollow Road. This is a picture of Major Dalaba's grave. Now, he was buried in the Bay State Cemetery, which is behind Maple Knoll, going out of Port Henry on Route 9. But his nephew or grandson, I don't know, I can't remember which, decided that the cemetery was under such disarray and not taken care of. He wanted him taken and put someplace where he'd be taken care of. So he had his body exhumed and moved to the Union Cemetery. Yes.
That stone around the Union Cemetery, did that come from the blast furnace also?
This stone here,
No, the wall.
the wall,
Is that across the school?
the wall at Pete Gilbo's?
No. Union Cemetery.
Oh, no, I don't think so. No, I don't know where that came from, George. Couldn't tell you. It could have. It doesn't seem that it's big enough. I think they had big square cut stone. for that, you know. This is a picture of Millbrook. Millbrook had, and the reason why they call it Millbrook is because it had so many mills on it. Grist mills, sawmills. That was the whole economy of the village, the town. And in 1869, they had what they called the Great Ensign Pond Flood. And believe me, it wiped everything out. The economy of the town was in jeopardy. They were afraid that the whole village was going to be washed away here. A man by the name of Bostwick Baldwin jumped on his horse and he beat the flood to Moriah by about 15 minutes so he could warn everybody to get away from the banks of the brook because it was going to rise.
Right center.
Moriah Center, yep, down through.
Is that when that dam by, Bishop Andy got wiped out?
It's out by Valentine's, I think, as you're going up through the turns.
Yeah.
There's one by Victor's also.
Is there one by Victor's too?
Just above the road.
Oh, yeah.
The center's one.
Yeah. Well, this one held back all the water on both sides, where you go through by Ensign Pond. But, you know, and quite a shot. Plus it was a rain that came down through enough to knock that dam out. It was, you know, like the floods we had how many years back that was, you know, I remember Mary Ann and I came home from Maine that day and the storm hit and such a deluge and it was washing all the roads out. And we took a ride down to Cheever Hole and water was going by so fast and it was right up over the high rock.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how high it was. My father said, must be a beaver dam broke. I said, Dad, there was a beaver dam going by every 5 seconds. You know, that's how much water there was, the volume going down through there. So anyways, Bostwick Baldwin saved the day. He was the Paul Revere of the day. I think he's probably relatives to John and
Mike.
Lionel was their father, I would imagine. And it left it wiped out so much stuff. There was so much debris in the lake. There's like 20 acres of debris out where the terminal dock is now. That's how much stuff it washed out into the lake. And it washed down and went over the bank across the road from Jimmy LaPierre's house, went over the bank and down in front of the Witherby Mansion, and down over the bank where Pat Sullivan lived, where Jimmy Lange lives now, down behind the high school. Well, the high school wasn't there then, but down through that gully and down through the grove, and it washed everything out by the station, the train station too.
So where did it enter the lake? Kenzie?
Train station.
No, by the train station, right out in front. It was in
Oh, okay,
it
yeah.
was in 1869.
Yeah.
And that must have really goofed things up because in 1868 is when the LC&Ms first started running. You know, so. This is a picture of the second turn on the racetrack.
The story's there.
A lot of them. I would imagine. But this is a Sherman racetrack, and it's all grown up now, but this is a picture of the second turn where you can see it pretty good. It's in Forge Hollow. So like I say, if you went over Forge Hollow Road and down through, and then took a right, come back down through Port Henry, there's so much stuff to see. It's amazing. Then that's what I would do with the kids. And I'd bring them down into the village and then go to the lake and back and forth. Oh,
Tim, just to interrupt here, there was another racetrack up at Evans Farm, John showed me,
oh yeah?
and it was a betting parlor. His mother told him. She said across the road was a building. He said, and they moved it years later. That was the betting parlor.
Oh
It's a
yeah?
little shack. You can almost see the outline. It's over the field. It used to be with the racetrack there. They race horses
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Now this is a picture of one of the witnesses. That's what I call them, my witnesses. They've witnessed everything. That's an oak tree in the front of the Catholic school. It used to be the Catholic school, now it's the ARC. In 1999, Hurricane Floyd came through. And you'll see the smaller tree just over the top of the picnic table. They planted that one to replace the one that Hurricane Floyd blew down. They aged that tree, and it was the same size as the other two. It was 275 years old then. So that was 24 years ago. So it makes it about 300. 300 years ago, it was what? 1723. So that's why I call these my witnesses. And I always show them because I don't know if people have a respect for something like that. I mean, it gives you a whole new idea. That was around when I imagine there's been an Indian or two that ran by them.
Yeah.
And a lot of Indians when St. Patrick's was open, I know that. There's the entrance to the tunnel, the approachway, I should say. And I always wanted to take and have that all cleaned out and have it so you could drive through it and turn around and drive back through it. I thought that'd be a neat thing, but I don't know if the Canadian Pacific would ever go for it. The Canadian National, that's all their property. There was that's on Tunnel Avenue. There's a picture of the tunnel, the entrance, the south entrance to it. Tim took that a couple days ago for me. There's a picture of where the blast furnace sat, across from the tunnel. As you can see, the stones in that wall back there, and the part of it caving in. It was in that corner someplace. Major Dalaba's house is just up on top of the hill. It's where Norm Myers used to live. And it burned like in 1955, I want to say, somewhere in there. I can remember when it burned. So it may have been later than that, a little later, maybe late 50s. But I can remember when it burned.
It's the year the Grand
Right.
Union was built.
Pardon?
It's the year the Grand Union was built.
Yeah? When Norm Myers' house burned?
55. That's
Yeah.
about his house.
That year, Tim, is that year he went to jail or no?
Who's that?
The house that burned.
Oh, I don't know. Did he? I didn't know he went to
Yeah,
jail.
oh yeah, it's common now, well, another
Tell us.
story.
He burned it on purpose?
I heard that.
Well,
That's right.
want to play, you gotta pay, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a picture of the LC&M tunnel on Whitney Street. Made in 1909. Whitney Street, of course, named after different ones. All the streets in Port Henry are, basically. The ones they couldn't name or think of somebody to name them after, they gave them numbers, like First, Second, and Third Street. There's only one street in Port Henry named after a woman, Elizabeth Street. Elizabeth was the daughter of Kennedy, who built all the houses on Kennedy Row. Yeah. And that's where the Chinese jail was.
Yep. That's right.
Tell me, you ever talked to, again, Pat Salerno Senior, still alive?
Yeah,
He lived there, and he said 4 families lived in that house, which wasn't very big.
oh
And
yeah.
each family had about 10 or 11 kids. He said 40 people lived in that house.
Well,
They all survived, and he said you grew up on that street.
oh yeah. How many veterans got killed off that street?
I think it was, I think it's 3 or 4, but there was 26 boys off that street. That
Yeah.
street, a lot of them were 2 brothers, because they were like a year apart.
Yeah,
A lot of brothers in that, but it's,
yeah. I think
Where's the street?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
It's a street
Crossing the mobile garage.
crossing the mobile garage, crossing
Oh,
where
all right.
Dead end street.
Belden and Edwards used to be on the
Yeah,
corner.
Did they make settling in that area or something?
No, that was up by the church here.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of Belden and Edwards, the old cement block building on the corner of Elizabeth Street, that was the shirt factory.
Yeah.
There's
That's
a
where
picture
they-
of that there in your, one of your historical calendars.
There is.
Sewing in there.
Yep, I've got it in one of my pictures here, I know I do.
Tim, did you ever hear of Homer Matthews?
Oh yeah, I knew Homer.
He lived in the
Yep.
Chinese jail when
Oh,
I was
yeah.
a kid. You had something wrong with your bicycle, you go down to see Homer. And his entrance was just a couple stones knocked out of the foundation on the east side. And you used to have to crawl over them, crawl over the sewer pipe. And he had a light in there for his shop, you know. But he never hardly charged anything for smoking.
No,
like
he
that.
still had it when he lived below Frankie Bizon on Toby Street.
Yeah.
He still fixed bikes for kids.
Homer was a nice man.
Yeah, yeah,
So where's the Chinese jail?
tore down now.
Yeah, where?
The house
Where
right
was
on the
it?
street.
Just below Pop Bullock's house. Yeah.
Right across from the Peters.
Then there was, in behind there was a roundhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I can remember going down, there's an old furnace down there that they had that heated the, I don't know if it was the roundhouse or whatever, but there's an old cement pad down there. And Charlie Burlingame and Donnie and Tom Gibo, and I would imagine all those guys from the South End, I can remember they had two poles, popple tree poles cut with a wooden backboard up in a rim, and that was that's where they learned how to play basketball, the old court down behind.
basketball players come out of there too.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
the girls played, I played over there basketball.
Did you, Sue?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the old court, and I used to get up and crawl in the front hole and crawl up in the top, and I could watch them playing. I was probably 10 then or 12, I don't know. Used to see them playing. I could never figure out why they stopped playing because somebody said foul. Then I finally after I knew finally after.
Have you got any pictures too? The other turntable, it was below Jean's, outstanding across the road.
Yeah,
That's in Champlain, I haven't looked at it, it's still there. They moved it up there
oh yeah.
back in the 30s, yeah, disassembled it. Brought it
Well,
up.
didn't they store the Willoughby Sherman's personal railroad car there in that area?
They may have, George. I don't know.
I know where that is at.
Oh yeah? Oh yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Crown Point.
Yes, yeah.
There's a picture of Pete's wall. Those are Major Dalaba's stones out of his furnace. Some of them. There's a picture, this first guy here with a big mustache. That's my great-grandfather, George Breeyear. And fourth one down is my other great-grandfather, Turrell. Charlie Turrell.
Your size?
Charlie Turrell was the engineer, my great-grandfather Breeyear was the conductor. That's taken behind Polly Salerno's house, Alphonse's. That wasn't yesterday.
What year do you think that was?
I would say maybe the 20s.
Yeah, teens.
That's number 14. So maybe, yeah, I would say teens or 20s maybe. There's a picture of my grandfather. And this gentleman here, you might have a fond memory of. That's Tom Finney's father.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I gotta tell you, I found this picture, my mother told me who it was. Said that that's Pa. I said, who's that guy? She goes, that's Mr. Finney's father. I said, really? So I went to Walmart and I had a copy of this made, and I brought it to him. I pulled up out front of his house one day, he was working in his garden. And I said, Mr. Finney. Yeah. I said, what are you doing? Holding my tomatoes. I said, oh. So he stopped and he started walking up towards the truck. I said, I got a little something for you. He said, oh yeah? He says, what's that? I said, here, and I handed him that picture. He started crying.
Oh,
Yeah.
It does, it does,
Steam engine
it
company,
does.
Tim.
Oh,
The
it
only
looks
steam
just like
engine
Tom.
company that will guarantee that their engine can pull a train up the steep incline to Michael. That's why they.
Steam engines won't? Steam engines won't?
Yeah, it's a Baldwin steam engine. That's where they got the contract for steam engine.
I know they had quite a few switchbacks. I think like 3 switchbacks on the way up through behind. There's one right by below Bumper Wheelock's house. Right where you go through the tunnel, there's one, after you go through the tunnel, you can see where it used to be.
And Tim, did you tell me this is the caboose that's currently on display?
This is the caboose that's down there, yes. That's number 5. That's the one that was made out of an ore car. Yeah. It's funny, my grandmother, she used to take and make sure that my grandfather's overalls and his frock and everything was all pressed. She used to iron it before he went to work. And back then, they didn't have spray starch back then or anything.
No, it's
So
a
she
hot
would
iron.
take plastic paper bags with wax on them. And when she ironed it, it would melt the wax on it and it would keep them. I can remember her ironing them. Yeah.
Not with an electric iron.
I mentioned his brother, my Uncle Tim Breeyear, who my brother's named after. He worked for the D&H after so many years. The tower that was across, not tower, but smokestack that was across from Jean's that they knocked down in 1922, it had a date on the top of it, 1922. He helped put that date on the top of that smokestack. Now, my Uncle Tom was working for the D&H and he ran over by a caboose and got killed in 1969. My father went and picked my grandfather up at work and they got down there about an hour after he passed away. It basically cut him right in half. And the man that was with him, they were afraid the caboose was going to go into Hudson River. They were pushing the caboose was ahead of the diesel, pushing it up into the Portland cement plant in Glens Falls, South Glens Falls. They were afraid the caboose got up on some ice and had a frog, like a switch, and they were afraid it was going to go into Hudson River. So my Uncle Tom told the guy that was with him, jump, jump. So he jumped, and my Uncle Tom threw the emergency brake, and then he jumped. Well, that guy, they both hit a bank. There was a road above the tracks. They both hit this bank. They slid back down under the caboose. The guy that slid back down under the caboose, he didn't get hurt at all that was with him. But my Uncle Tom, he slid down and the caboose wheels ran over him. But that man had 11 kids. There's a picture Tom Finnessy gave me. That's 2 locomotives, agreed to disagree. That was down in front of the building across from Jean's. That was yeah. He said, I got pictures of that. He says, I was wondering if anybody knows about that. I said, I never knew about it, Tom. Or he probably hushed it up. Those are 2 D&H locomotives.
It's 1-1.
Yeah, neither.
Looks like a draw.
Called it a draw.
Yeah.
There's another picture of it. Gee.
Oh,
There's a picture.
Is that the loser?
No. This is pictures of a wreck on the turn behind Paulie Salerno's house that went out onto the trestle. This train went off the track went off the trestle and went down onto the main line of the D&H and blocked it so they couldn't go through. You'll see in the next two, see the trestle that they used to go on? This one here, you can't see, but that's a locomotive upside down. You see the smokestacks? That's the main line going through.
I'm always shocked at how high that trestle was
Yeah.
as a
How
piece of
rickety it
engineering.
was.
Yeah. The weight on that.
Yeah. Weight and the speed going over that? It's crazy.
Those piers are still there, a lot of them, if you walk
Yeah.
from the beach over,
Yeah.
they're right there.
There's the overhead crane. Of course, there's the trestle going underneath it there.
Yeah.
They have a neat picture now of the trestle like this with a LC&M on it with a couple of cars. They're dumping the ore down on it.
And the one surviving pillar that's down in the space between the two campgrounds, is that one of these concrete buttresses?
I think it's the end of the trestle.
End of it, okay.
Because I imagine when they stopped, that probably had a lot of shock to it.
Sure, it's almost a wave following it, yeah.
There's I don't know, this is just an old picture that I found in my mother's stuff. I'm sure it's of a D&H or an LC&M picture, but
Looks like one of the
don't know when or where. Looks like in Mineville maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't yesterday. Okay, these are pictures of my mother had of that's her writing. Taken January 30th, 1929. That's the day my father was born. This is a picture of, it's funny. This year on my father's birthday, I was looking at pictures of that they had posted on things I like about the town of Moriah. Any of you ever look at that? Yeah. Okay, there was a picture on there of workers on the bridge when they were pouring cement, and there was a bunch of them all together by the screed standing there, and I picked out my grandfather because he used to run that crane when they were building the bridge.
Champlain Bridge?
Yes.
29.
He also ran the overhead crane down here. You know, he was a jack of all trades. He ran a crane down in Troy when the railroad was shut down. Yeah. I was telling Chris earlier, he said it had 100 ton of rail for ballast, and you could see all the rails on the back end of it here,
Yeah.
so that it wouldn't flop over when it was picking up. There's the guys out on the ice, looks like they're pulling or something, but that was January 30th, 1929.
Over 2 feet of ice.
Probably.
Right.
But mind you now, that's January 30th, 1929. September 1929, they opened it.
That's great.
Hot riveting in the middle of the winter.
Frank Stossabaz, that's Tommy's father. And my mother's her father. Frank support Henry. They walked across it opening day. Never knew each other. They had to cross somewhere. They become friends, 30 years later.
Wow. This is Labor Day, 1959. These were taken right below Hyatt's Barber Shop, I think. Not much different in today's Labor Day. I don't know any of those guys. I've probably heard of them. Obviously, probably veterans from the Korean War or World War II. You can see the Witherby Mansion in the background there. Frank Witherby Mansion. I don't see the Grand Union though. That might be there. It must be there if it was built in 55, right? No, we got bagpipers. Sable Chasm, look at See the date on the bottom?
Yeah.
There's the Golden Eagles, German Bugle Corps.
Around here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was his wife. He was good.
I almost want to say one of those, this guy, I think this guy on the left might be my grandfather walking. He was a fireman for years. There's my great-grandfather, the one I told you that was by the locomotive. That's years later when he's out fishing. Smell.
How to get the shanty out?
How did they get it out? They used to have to push it. Or get somebody to tow it for them. Yeah, that's why my father bought our Model B in 1960. Yeah, those were they were the prelude to the four-wheeler. Freddie Rowe had one.
Yeah.
Gussie Kimball had one. You know, anybody who was anybody on the lake had a Model A.
Couple on the bottom too, is it?
Oh yeah, a lot of them on the bottom from Blaze. Freddie's had been down 3 or 4 times. Gussie and his mother went down off Sandy Beach Point. She went right to bottom in it. She stayed right in it. Finally got it out of it, got out. There's my Aunt Hazel Turrell, the big woman. The small woman, I don't know who she was. I think I want to say Annie Goozy, they called her, or something like that.
Yes. That's what he is.
She holding the rifle? I can't.
Aunt Annie.
Yeah.
That's what it's Aunt Annie. Yeah.
Your aunt, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she's holding the rifle, and that's my father's first 7-point buck.
It's my dad's.
Boy, she got the rifle in. She shoot it for her father?
Don't know.
It's tagged. It's tagged.
Well, Aunt Hazel, I told Chris I wanted to put that picture in of her on her.
Is she real tall or is the other lady really short?
Yeah.
No, she was very sharp. Annie Goozy
Annie was very short, yeah.
Hazel was a wonderful person. She was.
You remember my Aunt Hazel?
Yes, very well. She was a nice lady. Nice lady.
Well, I got to tell you about her. My father's mother died when he was 5. And she had 5 kids when she married my grandfather. My uncle Walt Young, remember Walt Young?
Oh yeah, sure.
Fred Young,
Yeah.
John Young, Jim Young, and then my Aunt Ruth Bovary, Aunt Whitler. She was my father's half sister.
Yeah.
And they all were, still young enough to take care of. And when my grandmother died, my father was only 5, my Aunt Clara was 7. And she asked my Aunt Hazel to take care of the family.
Yep.
My Aunt Hazel moved in and did all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the laundry. And my Uncle Walt, my Uncle Jinx, my Uncle Cop, and my Uncle Fred, they were all young guys working and stuff, and they'd come home.
Yeah.
My grandfather, they loved my grandfather just like he was their own father.
Yeah.
Always had great respect for him and him for them.
Yeah.
My father always considered them his brothers, not half brothers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she took care of him. She died 92 years old as an old maid. Never.
Yeah.
But that was her family.
Her best friend was my Aunt Helene Turner from Crown Point. She had Helene Gibbs at that.
There's my Uncle Bob Gilbo. That's my mother's brother. And that's old Joe Gilbo.
Yeah.
And Granny Gilbo next to him. Those are my great-grandmother and great-grandfather.
Bob Gibble from Ryan?
Bob Gilbo from Moriah.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a good athlete too.
He was in the Navy.
Yeah.
I was telling Chris, I still can't think of the name of the ship. He was on the Santa Fe, a light cruiser in World War II. And his ship was the first one to get to, boy, I wish I could think of the name of that carrier. It was an aircraft carrier. you've been on the aircraft carrier down Yorktown. All right, on that aircraft carrier, they had films of the one that got hit with the kamikazes,
Yeah,
and 1,100 men died on it.
yeah, what's the name of that?
Was that the Hornet, Tim?
No,
No, different one.
the light,
It's not the Enterprise, but
that 1,100 men died on it, and it was,
did it
His
survive?
ship-
I can't remember.
his boat was the first one back to it, or that got to it to help him.
Yeah.
I mean, there was holes in the deck of that thing, and what pleased me is when I was down there, they had a monkey fist, they called it. It looked like a hand grenade with like a hook off the end of it, and they used that to take and throw one line from the one boat to the other. That monkey fist was used to throw the first line to this aircraft carrier.
Was it the Franklin?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
It didn't sink, or it didn't sink right away.
No, it
Yeah.
didn't sink. They held it, it had like a 43-degree list on it.
Yeah.
And their ship ended up towing it back to San Francisco and then
Okay.
back to New York, I believe. But yeah, they had, and my mother said he'd wake up in the middle of the night after the war screaming, nightmares about it and stuff. Of course, he's a 20-year-old kid, 22 years
Yeah,
old.
yeah.
See something like that.
The average age on it is like 19 years old. Ice cream machines everywhere.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Because they're so young.
There's Patricia. That's my mother. Yeah, she was about 12 there probably. Huh. There's my Aunt Hazel's house. There's the big tree they hung the buck up in. And that house, before my Aunt Hazel and my grandfather and my grandmother lived there, was a flop house. Well, I say flop house, they call it that. What did you call it, Chris?
Hot bunkin'.
Hot bunking, yeah. The guys that worked in the furnace at night would come home and sleep in the beds during the day, and the guys that slept in the beds that night would be gone to work. That night they'd come home and those guys would get out, go to work, and the other guys would get in before the bunk cooled off.
Same as an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Where is that house? Is it still standing?
That house is behind remember where Arturo's was?
Yep.
It's the second house on Jackson Street.
Yep.
Okay.
Second house on your, as you're going up it on the right.
It's right above the laundromat.
Yeah.
Yeah, right behind the laundromat.
Kitty corner to the laundromat.
Yeah, kitty corner, yep,
Arturo's would have been the place right next to the laundromat towards Gene.
yep. This picture's taken, it's my grandfather and Bob
Dr.
Baird.
Baird, this is the Baird house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna, that's my grandfather and Duffer and Ed Greenwood, Paul Greenwood's father.
I hope the bear's deceased.
And I don't know what the
or
bear's name was.
You can tell them where that is today, Tim. You can't miss the crock in the mobile garage.
Yeah.
Orange and purple and all.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
It was a judge owned it, and that house was spectacular.
But I'll bet little did they know then that they were gonna be related. Well, they aren't related, but little did they know then when they were hunting together that my father and his niece were gonna get married. Baird, my grandmother was a Baird, my grandmother Gilbo. Yeah, there's a bear and a bear. There's my grandfather, my Aunt Clara, and my father. My Aunt Clara moved to New Mexico and became a nurse. She was a head nurse in a cardiology unit out there in Albuquerque. You know. There's a picture, no, I don't think anybody's seen yet. That's a picture of Joe Gilbo's All-Stars. Oh, there's there's a name on the bottom of that. The name's not on the bottom of it.
Oh, let's see.
What year would that be?
Not long
It's
after
gotta
basketball.
be after 1929.
Right, right.
Well, why it says Joe
Joe Gil, why does it say Joe Gilbo's All-Stars?
Yeah.
Because that's old Joe Gilbo.
Stanley's father.
That's Stanley. He's my great-grandfather. Johnny was my grandfather. He died 5 months before my mother was born. Him and Stanley and Hank and my great-grandfather, old Joe. He started the store and they were working in Gilbo's store with him. And my grandfather got septic poisoning from doing plumbing. Died of septic poisoning, 29 years old. You know, left my grandmother with 3 kids and 4 months pregnant. You know. The guy in the front here is William Grant, might be Jerry Grant's father. Remember Jerry?
Oh, sure.
The second guy is Milford Waldron.
You're talking about from
Second guy on this side, that's Dick and Jack Waldron's father,
Yep.
Marilyn's father. And they all played baseball together too. That's the thing. And then there was the third one is Hank Gilbo. Remember Hank that lived at the bottom of the
Lived right over
high
here.
school hill?
Right over here,
Yeah.
Black.
And then the fourth one is Dick Braisted in the back. And then old Joe. And then this guy was Ed Jackson, was the coach, another coach. Then I don't know who the guy that was in the back there. They don't know who that was. The next guy was Banks Parnell. My Uncle Hank said he was the best athlete he ever saw. He said he was incredible. You know, he was. And then Art Vanderhoof is the second one on this side. And then the first one is Stanley Gilbo.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
So who started the store to begin with? Old Joe? Or Stan?
old Joe started the store. J.H. Gilbo.
Oh,
Joseph Henry.
I didn't know Stanley had that.
You know, Joseph Henry. There's another Joseph Henry now. That's what Nate named his little boy. By the way, Nate's gonna have twins. Well, Nate's not, but.
That's a miracle.
I think that might be the end of the photos.
Is that it?
Would you be willing to entertain a few questions from Facebook, and then we can open to questions?
There's Facebook questions?
We got Facebook questions. Somebody is wondering, go back up to it here. Jerry's wondering if anybody knows about a cave down the hill from the water tower, and it would be along Mill Brook, I think, and perhaps that was an early mining operation.
It very well could be. I've never
don't
been
know.
there, but there's mines all over.
Yeah, watch your step.
Behind his house, behind the water tower.
Whose is it?
On Spring Street.
On the end of
Yeah,
Spring
the end where
Street.
Jeff and Linda Smythe lived.
Yeah.
When he wrote the 21 mine, he said, I was wandering around, he said, and somebody told me he said, down behind my house over that bank, there's a small cave. I went and looked in there, he said, so, now wherever that is, it's down behind the water tower.
Yeah.
Well, a few people know about it.
The pipeline used to run all the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still a good section of it down by 9N. Yeah. And then we have Pam is wondering if you happen to know what the first home in town was, and whether it might be her grandparents' home, which was a red farmhouse on Elk Inn. That's the family story.
The first home in town?
Yeah.
The first home in town was Mackenzie City down by Mackenzie Brook, coming into Port Henry in the south end.
Okay.
Yeah. If you look at the backside of where Earl Sprague had his woodshed, he's got a sign up that says Mackenzie City.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is the Delaware house up on Broad Street, is that?
The Dalaba house is where Norm Myers used to live.
Oh, no, we're,
Meacham House. Is it
Right
me?
below, where Belson's house.
Hubbard.
Right
Hubbard house?
Right above Kansas house.
Yeah, that's. Hubbard House. That was the first,
That was, yeah.
the first frame house built in Port Henry. Yeah.
Isn't the Bishop House in Moriah Corners, isn't that the oldest house now? Next to the Reverend,
Bishop House in Moriah,
next to the
that's the oldest one in Moriah. Yeah. According to what I've read.
Who discovered ore, sir?
Who discovered ore? Where? Along, in the town of Moriah? Goes back to where, before Philip, it's like before, Philip Skeen knew it was there. And
Who?
they must have found it before then, or,
Samuel D. Champlain.
Oh, yeah, probably Sam did.
No, because his, compass.
Oh,
Crazy, it's usually an indication of ore, so when he noted that in his,
that could be.
yeah.
I know Port Henry, they gave, like I live on my land is on what they used to call Legs Patent, which was a land grant from the Fort Crown Point given to retired soldiers. And it's up on Big Hollow, big deal.
Well, you tell me it's Hendricks, and that was Chief Hendricks, the girl told me.
Hendricks,
It's an Indian, Hendricks Extension, there's 2 big lots. Huge.
yeah, Hendricks owned it, and then,
He's part Indian, John Evans told me, that's his great-grandfather.
who was telling you that?
John Evans said, he said, my great-great-grandfather was a Hendricks.
Yeah.
And his sister did some research, supposedly, he was granted that land for fighting in the Revolutionary War. They gave him, and those 2 big blocks is all Hendricks. He said that's where the Hendricks came from, it was a grant.
I know that the village of Port Henry bought that land for Hendricks because he used to be the garbage man where I live.
Uh-huh.
He used to be the garbage man for Port Henry, and he raised pigs, and that's where he dumped everything. I got about, between my house and the Big Hollow Road, I probably got 1 million old broken Coke bottles. And I don't know what else in there. Tons of cans, old cans and stuff. And old fenders from old cars. I got an old car down in the field that's got trees growing up through it with suicide doors on it, and it was a convertible.
Jackson Street, and then it's where the Cedar Knoll house was, what's her name, that's by Jean's, those 2 streets. If you go up in between, in the spring of the year, there's a gully on each side of those, and it's full of refrigerators, old cars. I mean, they stopped dumping probably in the 1950s or 60s. I was up there one spring, and they said, yeah, I mean, now it's pretty much all over, but everybody just dumped everything in that big gully.
Across from Glen Morby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, played in there a lot of times. Yeah. I remember across from cars, across from Pine Street, there was a dump there where Eddie King lives now. There was a gully there, and the school was dumping all the remnants of brick and stuff when they were building the school. And Ralph King and I dug out over 400 bricks that were still good, that they threw away. And we had them all stacked up. And I think we sold them for a nickel a piece to Tony Lemson. Yeah.
Do you know the history on Dr. Spalding's house on Main Street, the White House?
Dr. Spalding's?
Yeah, the White House.
Above Dr. Gladys.
No, not Gladys, the one
Above
next.
Gladys.
Yeah,
What
above
is
Gladys.
Spalding the chiropractor?
Yeah, he was a chiropractor. Do you know the history on that one? Because the little part of the house is really old.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there's, I've read stuff where they try to describe what the village was like back like in 1850, what was here and what was there, you know. And you get the idea where some places are, but then they lose you because you can't connect them with the names. But, you know, like they said, the Meacham farm on the south part of Port Henry, well, I knew where that Meacham house was. It's where the credit union is now. You know, they tore that down. But there used to be a farm down there, and it was all, and then there's, you know, the Coventry farm, and just different.
Well, I know the house is on that, what's that, the map, that map there? I know the house is on that map.
I don't know any history
You don't
on
know
it
any
at all.
history on that one?
Come on
There's so
in.
much stuff rolling around in my head.
You must remember the last active one I remember as a little kid was the lady's old house.
Whose?
The ladies,
Oh, Falaise, yes.
Spring Street.
There's a lot of Model A's behind that
Oh
one.
my God, it's gotta be 50 feet deep or
Yeah.
Tell me, maybe you do, I think I told her this story. Billy Troll, my older cousin, he grew up with the beast when they went to Egypt in the early 1900s. They brought back a mummy.
My father could remember the mummy.
And it was in this house over here that Joe Cookie, that's the servant's house. And Billy said they used to let them kids go in and play pool. And he said, I walked by that room and that damn mummy would be right standing up on the second floor. But nobody knows where it went. I mean, I asked Joe, I said, your mummy? He said, no. Billy said he saw it. I've seen it back in the 40s when he was a kid.
My father
I just wonder where the heck it is today. I'm sure they gave it to a museum, but nobody knows.
My father said he can remember the mummy because he used to mow lawn from Mrs. Willoughby.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he got like 15 cents an hour or 25 cents an hour. He said, and there weren't any power mowers in either. It was all push mower.
They brought that back from a trip to Egypt back when nobody cared. Bring anything you want. The early 1900s after all that. But he's seen it. I just wonder where the heck it is today.
I don't know what they did with it. He said that was good money back then.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he said there were grown men working for her back then, getting 25 cents an hour.
Well, I won't end the conversation. If folks want to stay after and continue to ask questions and chat, please do. We'll be here for a little while. But I want to thank Tim for coming out and thank everybody for coming out this evening to join us.
Oh, I guess I took up the hour.
It's been a great conversation. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.